Bienvenidos a su programa de Cabeza. Les comparto, afortunadamente a través de la Ciudad de las Ideas hemos tenido el gusto, el honor de conocer el pensamiento de más de 800 brillantes personajes. Pero tenemos nuestro 1%. El 1% de esos 850, 860 que han marcado una diferencia bajo mi humilde perspectiva. El invitado de hoy es uno de esos 1%. Ese 1% donde no solamente tienen algo que decir, que es lo más relevante, sino cómo decirlo, que es contraintuitivo y que fueron los primeros además en decirlo. Y ese es Dan Gilbert, un querido y admirado amigo de la Universidad de Harvard. Él es una persona que ha sido reconocida en la universidad y que tiene una serie televisiva sobre la vida emocional, un libro increíble que se llama Stumbling on Happiness, sobre la felicidad y muchos trabajos sobre la mente humana. Dan, it's a real pleasure and honor to have you here in the program Upside Down. Welcome to your program.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure to talk with you again. It's been too long.
Absolutely. Actually, I think the last time I saw you was in Edinburgh, in this conference that it was very provocative. It's always an honor, Dan. I mean, with your own words, just to start with, 1, 2 minutes, whatever you want to. Tell us a little bit about your credentials, about your work, your research, your concerns, and of course, your passion.
Well, my passion, of course, you can probably tell from the way I look, my passion is my grandchildren. But we won't talk about that. I'm a professor at Harvard University. I've taught here for, about 25 years. As a scientist, I'm interested in why people feel and think and act the way they do. My particular interest is in how people think about the future, something that psychologists call prospection. We contrast this with retrospection, thinking backwards. And as I began to study prospection many years ago, I started to ask myself, why? Why do we think about the future? And the answer that occurred to me was in order to make ourselves happy. We want to get to good futures and avoid bad ones. Well, I wondered, are we any good at doing that? I'm sure we are. Maybe I'll just stop and do a little study and a little test. That was 25 years ago, and I'm still working on the problem because it turns out to be so much richer and more interesting than I'd ever imagined. You know, sometimes science reaches out and captures you, and it won't let you go, and that's what's happened with me.
Actually, now that you mention it, I remember, but please correct me, probably I'm wrong, that in your book, Stumbling on Happiness, there was like a line that says, or I don't know in which work I read it from you, that says, okay, what makes us different between other animals? And you put like a blank space that everybody could answer. And if I remember correctly, you said what makes us different from other animals, the human animal thinks about the future. Is that correct? That's what really makes us that we can plan. Even that there are some animals that plan for the winter and that we know them, that they prepare with their food, etc. But it's not exactly the same thing that you're talking about, no?
Your memory for an old book is very, very good. I think you may remember it better than I do. But you're right. In the book, I make a claim. Many people say, what makes human beings so unique, so different from other animals? Maybe it's language. Maybe it's using tools. My claim is it's thinking about the future. Now, can other animals think about the future? Maybe some animals a little bit. Just as an aside, the best candidate is not chimpanzees, it's crows. They seem to plan for the future, but only in one small way and only for a very short time. You and me, we can think about our retirement. We can think about our grandchildren's retirement. We can think about thousands of years from now. This is a remarkable capacity that no other animal has. And so it isn't too surprising that when we use it, we sometimes make mistakes. You know, this ability is, in evolutionary terms, it's in beta testing. It's brand new. And so there are ways in which it misleads us, it goes wrong. That's really what I've been studying for the last 2 decades.
Then, and well, this has to do with imagination. It's also part of thinking about the future. And when I ask you, well, what's your passion? And you say, well, my grandchildren. One day, I mean, I'm just bringing it, this is an association because of what you said. But one day, I remember you told us to a group of people that you asked your mother or your grandmother or your bubble or your mother, tell me the 3 things about happiness. And I remember in a way you talk about the difference between grandchildren and children. Do you remember that? Could you share it with us?
I do remember this is a conversation you and I have had, and also a talk that I gave. You were in attendance, so we're now old men reminiscing. But look, there are many things that bring happiness, and many things that don't. And if you ask your mother, she will tell you. It turns out your mother is right about some things, but science also knows she's wrong about others. What is she right about? If your mother was like mine, she said, you need to find a nice girl, get married, make your life happy. She's right. It turns out human relationships are our greatest source of happiness, particularly romantic relationships. Your mother probably told you it would be good if you earned money. And she's right. It's good not to worry about our security, our safety, our medical care, about food for our family. Your mother probably told you you should have children, they'll make you happy. And that turns out not to be true, at least not on average across the world. When scientists study the happiness of people who have children and the people who don't, they find something quite surprising. The people with children are a little less happy than the people without them. I think that's what you're remembering. When I say this to groups of people, particularly in Latin America, they just fall back in their chairs, as if I've told them, you know, there are 3 moons and 2 suns. How can this be true? But it turns out it is true.
No, I remember that you mentioned, actually, I quote you all the time, that grandchildren was actually chocolate without calories.
Well, grandchildren, of course, bring happiness, and they require no work on your part. And that tells you something. But the reason children don't make people happy, it's not that they don't love them. Of course we love them. It's that they're very, very hard work for their parents. And so they tend to lower their parents' happiness just a little bit. Grandchildren, it's all the joy with none of the effort.
You talk about two other variables. One is to have a couple, to have a person that you love. Of course, I can imagine that that probably people that are married or have a significant other, if they have a good relation, are happier than those that they don't have one, is my first question. And secondly, if you have a couple that you love a lot and it makes you much more happier, to have more than one couple will make you much, much, much more happier, or that's a trap?
Wait, I'm not understanding. More than one couple? What do you mean? More than one romantic partner? Well,
yes.
If you have more than one romantic partner and they're all happy about this, then A, you are probably happy, and B, you are probably the only man in the world who experiences this. Because most romantic couples don't want more than one partner for their partner. Is that what I'm going to ask? This is probably where we'll edit. I'm not sure that's what you're asking me.
No, in a way, yes. And I mean, the question has to do with 2 things. Are the people that are married are happier than those that are not, or not necessarily, or I'm talking about average and big data that you have evaluated. And secondly, people that are happier, they get married, or people married are more happier, or go both ways?
Both ways. Okay, so I'll answer. That's a great question. It turns out that married people are somewhat happier than unmarried people. And there's no mystery about why. They live longer, they have better health, they have more money per person. Almost everything that a person would want, married people have a little more of. Now, is that because marriage makes them happy, or does being happy make them married? Both things turn out to be true. Happy people, they do better on the marriage market. Everyone likes to be with somebody who smiles. No one wants to be with somebody who's sad all the time. But the opposite is also true. It looks like marriage creates a boost in people's happiness. Now, I will just say one thing as a word of warning. Any kind of marriage does not increase happiness. What kind does? A good marriage. Now, I know that sounds a little circular, but it is true. When
Absolutely.
people are in a good relationship, they get lots of happiness from it. If they're in a bad relationship, their happiness goes up when they get divorced. So, the best way to know whether a person will get happiness from their marriage is their answer to this question. Is your husband or wife your best friend? People
Wow.
who say yes get lots of happiness from marriage. People who say no, less so.
What a great question. I love it. Then also you mentioned money or income, which is of course not the same thing, income, wealth, whatever. But if I remember, if you don't have enough, I mean the baseline of income, it doesn't matter. You will never be happy because you're concerned about the education, the health, what you will eat that day. But there is a big debate. I have been reading different answers to the terms that above, I don't know, $80,000 per year in the United States. I don't remember the number. But above that, you could become a billionaire, but you're not very happy. Or you can be now the richest person in a poor place, and you will be much more happier than a richer person than you were before, but in a poor place. What's really there in the last research about the relation of money, status, and happiness?
Well, it's either very complicated or very simple. Here's the very simple answer. Money buys happiness. That's it. That's the simple answer. The relationship between income or wealth and happiness is positive. The more money, the more happy. But it's not linear. It's not a simple relationship. And what that means is that if you have no money and you get some, it increases your happiness a lot. If you have a lot of money and you get some more, it increases your happiness a tiny, tiny amount. Because if you have $1 million and you suddenly have two, will your happiness go up? Yes, that much, a tiny amount, because you already have all of the happiness money can buy. So when scientists tell you that there's a happiness threshold, what they mean is that at a certain level of income, you have almost all of the happiness that you can get from money. You have 99%. Now, do you want to spend the rest of your life trying to get the extra 1%? Or do you want to spend it enjoying the 99% of happiness you already have?
It's pretty interesting. I will try to be able to elaborate this, and actually in English, which, as you can see, is not my first language. I can see that many times the marginal utility of $1 extra, it's less than those that you had before because you already have the power to buy many things. However, at the beginning, people that have very little money after the survival number, $1 more, it's not significant because with that money, with that dollar, they cannot buy a house. But then it comes like from $40,000 in their income to 45, and they are able to buy something that they could never dream to have about. So probably at the beginning, the line, I don't know, it's a question, the line is not like that. Probably at the beginning, the marginal benefit of an additional dollar could be higher than the last one until you reach to a point that then, okay, like you mentioned, it will increase, but in a decreasing way, Am I right?
Yes, you are, but it's a very hard thing to say for most people to say to them, it increases at a decreasing rate. I think the easier way for people to understand it is that at a much lower level than you can imagine, you already have enough. It's just not going to make a big difference. And the things you will have to do to earn more money to increase your happiness maybe take opportunity costs. They may be taking away time you could be spending doing things that would increase your happiness. For example, when we look at how people spend their time, the more money you earn, the more time you spend alone, and the less time you spend with family and friends.
Wow.
My prescription to anybody who has $1 million is, if they say, I want another million, I'd say, okay. If somebody hands it to you, you should say yes and take it. But if you have to work many hours for it, think of what you're giving up. You could be increasing your happiness by spending more time with your grandchildren, or cultivating a talent, learning to play the guitar, giving to charities. These things, it's not that your happiness has hit the highest point it can, it's just that it's at the highest point that money can push it. It's funny, when you talk about money, you instantly talk about buying things. But one of the things we know is that the best way to spend money isn't to buy things, it's to buy experiences, things to do, things you can remember. You do them with someone else. You come and you visit Cambridge. I come and visit you in Mexico City. And I've never forgotten the time I came to Mexico to visit with you, but I can't remember anything I bought that year. So one of the reasons money doesn't increase happiness is because people spend it the wrong way.
It's incredible. And of course, there is another one dimension is time, which it has like the venue of experiences. And the other is that one probably that you have already buy many things with money, then you increase your income or your wealth much more than before. And then you have access to power. And then it's a very new perspective and dimension. So as you have said, it's very complicated. It's a complex, it could be very easy, like you mentioned it in a line, or it could be very complicated. Coming back to what you mentioned with the time to be with your family, and that the opportunity costs that when you have much more money, you spend less time. This is extremely important because now you're talking about experiences, but you're also mentioning, as there was this study that they rate what makes happy people, and they said it's not your degrees, it's not the money you have, it's the way you spend it with the people that you love. How true is that, and how sound was that study done, like, I don't know, like 80 years ago that began?
It's 110% true.
Okay.
In fact, it's probably, if somebody said to me, Professor, you've studied happiness for 25 years, can you stand on one leg and tell me in one sentence, what's the secret of happiness? I'd stand on one leg and I'd say, happiness is other people. We are the most social animal on earth, right? Even bees and ants and termites, which have complex societies, are not nearly as social as we are. Our connections to other human beings are the single greatest source of our happiness. If you told me I have two friends, one of them has a lot of money and good health, but he doesn't have too many friends. The second one, he has poor health and no money, but he has many friends. I would make a very strong bet on which one has more happiness. Wow. A person's social network, how many and how good the relationships are, is the best predictor of their happiness, better than their physical health, better than their income, better than their gender, better than their age. So our connections to other people are our best source of happiness. I know I sound like I'm in charge of a religion and I'm trying to make you be a good person. Look, if it was the other way around, I'm a scientist. I would tell you, get rid of all those people in your life. You should just try to earn money. It's just not true.
Wow. And I mean, after Aristotle and many people have studied the Stuart Mill, Benham Jeremiah, so many philosophers have been studying the issue of happiness. But for my knowledge, in the contemporary time, Dan Gilbert was the first person that truly, in a very serious and scientific, with the knowledge that we know now about our brain, about how the emotions operate, about all this new knowledge, you were like the first one with stumbling on happiness to say, okay, This is what we know, this was true, this was not true, this is scientific, and there is the evidence. After you, many people have been written many, many books, but you were the first one. And the same thing have happened with with one of the perspectives of climate change. I remember that many years ago I read a paper that you wrote that says, well, climate change is an issue, but the important thing is why people don't actually react as they should in a so important and challenging question. Could you elaborate that a little bit? Because it was also for me amazing how you open a new paradigm for everybody.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to comment on this. Many years ago, I was puzzled by something. In America, on September 11th, 2001, we were attacked by terrorists and 3,000 Americans died. We have spent billions of dollars to make sure this doesn't happen again. In fact, we've utterly changed so many systems, including our democracy. This was so big that we felt we had to respond. Now, at the same time, we do very little about climate change. Under the most liberal of our democratic presidents, we do something. Under our current regime, we do nothing. None of it equals the response we had to terrorism. And yet, there is no calculus by which terrorism is a greater threat to human beings than climate change. And so I found myself wondering, why do we respond to the smaller threat with such force and to the bigger threat barely at all? And the answer in the piece that you're talking about that I wrote, the answer for me is that terrorism is exactly the kind of threat that our brain was evolved to respond to, right? It involves other human beings, bad people who want to hurt us. It has a moral dimension to it. It's happening right now. They kill people quickly. Climate change, on the other hand, there's no person who's trying to hurt you. It doesn't seem to have a moral dimension. It's just chemical and meteorological. It's happening slowly over time. So my conclusion is that climate change is a perfect threat. It's exactly the kind of thing that you would engineer to destroy our species, because we can't respond to it. It's just not the kind of threat that our brain was evolved to care about. That's why in my country, at least, we are doing virtually nothing to stop absolute calamities. But if you come to our country, you'll spend an hour in the airport to make sure you don't, have a cigarette later. To me, this seems like a crazy balance that psychologists have to think about.
No, and I think it has to do with your first observation when we began the program that you said about timing and planning. I mean, the dystopia that we have as humans, that something that could happen in the future, not in the near future, but in the future, and that, or next generations or whatever, and that our contribution to solve it depends in game theory to the contributions of many others, make us like not so close to our emotions that there is really a danger and we don't care enough. Is there a way then to approach this policy implication in a different manner, understanding the human nature of our species, like changing the narratives? Or what can we do? Or what can the leaders of the main countries could do to change their narratives? Because Al Gore and all these people that are talking about this issue are very rational, very cortex, and I think they are losing their time. Is there a way we can work differently?
I do think we can. And when people say, what can I do about climate change? I say you have many options. You have recycling. You have changing your light bulb. You can buy an electric car. All of these will make almost no difference. But there is one thing you can do that will have a big effect on climate change in my country: vote. These are problems that must be solved by governments. They are not problems that can be solved by each individual. We can't have campaigns to inspire everybody to use a different light bulb. Yes, some people will do it, some people won't. It will make a small difference. What we can do is elect leaders who will force our societies to do difficult things that will really have an impact. So I always tell people, forget about your recycling, forget about your electric car. Just try to get someone elected who can really solve this problem, because this problem is no longer. When I wrote this essay, you were remembering, it was in the far future. It's not in the far future anymore. Today, there's a hurricane approaching the southern coast of our country that will cause great damage because there are so many more hurricanes in this particular spot. The west coast of my country is on fire because it's too dry. All sorts of things are now happening around us. Is there still time to do something? Yes, there's still time to do something. You should have been doing things 10 years ago. Anyway, you've given me a soapbox and you've told me to stand on it and wave my fingers. I could talk a long time about this, but I really do think it's misguided to ask, how can we change the minds of people? Question is, how can we get leaders to lead? You know, most leaders are followers. And so they have to be convinced that people will respond positively in the ballot box if they do things that are hard, like institute a carbon tax. That'll be a little hard. It'll hurt many people's income, okay? But it can save the planet, and we need to do it.
I love it. And I mean, you have a colleague there at Harvard named Ronnie Heifetz at the Kennedy School, who actually said what you mentioned. I mean, leaders are followers, and you have to put into the emotions of the followers like a best narrative to understand that the biggest demand and the challenge they are facing. And like that, they will have leaders that will change things. Changing a little bit the topic, talking about memory, because at the end, what we remember is what we are. It's our identity, it's our way of really thinking that we feel or not feel happy or not happy. You have written correlations about what we remember at the end of a conversation, at the end of a trip, and of course has to do with the experiences and intensities. But what can you tell us about the correlation between memory and happiness in a way?
Well, you would think it would be a very easy thing to remember. We have an experience, it makes us happy or not, and we remember and we learn and we move forward. It turns out that memory for one's own experiences can easily be distorted. And that's why people don't seem to learn good lessons from their own successes and failures in life about happiness. So, many people who go through a terrible divorce, they get married again, as though they didn't learn the lesson that maybe marriage isn't for them. Most women who have a child, that day they go, never again, the pain is too great. But then they remember it wasn't so bad, and so they have another. Many of us make the same mistakes over and over in our lives, not because we're stupid, but because our memories change to fit our current view rather than to reflect how we really felt.
Wow. My dear Dan, it's always an honor and it's memorable. Always when I talk with you, I learn from you. And I will never forget the first time you came to Ciudad Las Ideas, or when I visit you at Harvard or Edinburgh, and today. I only have to tell you thank you very much for sharing not only your content and the brilliance and breaking paradigms, but the generosity that you have always had with us. Thank you very much, and it has been an honor to be with you one more time. Unforgettable.
My pleasure entirely. Un abrazo, amigo.
All my love. Thank you. Señoras y señores, Dan Gilbert, su gran obra, Stumbling on Happiness, su gran serie de televisión, La vida emocional, sus grandes trabajos que han roto paradigmas, temas de memoria, de medio ambiente, de matrimonio, de hijos, pero sobre todo, llega a una conclusión. La fórmula de la felicidad son las conexiones. Es pertenecer, es amar y ser amado. Espero que hayan gozado de esta plática con este personaje tan distintivo y tan brillante. Quédese aquí, en ADN 40, su canal. Buenas noches. Nos vemos el domingo que entra de cabeza.